This week on Christian World News, a historic choice at the Vatican. The world's Catholic bishops elect the first American Pope. We'll tell you all about Pope Leo XIV and his decades of service as a missionary. Plus, the Islamic militant group that rules Syria, how it's threatening religious minorities, including Christians, and why Israel is stepping in to help. And a place where Christians are arrested, tried, and convicted for silent praying. It's not in the Middle East. It's happening in Britain. Welcome to Christian World News. I'm Gary Lane. Pope Leo XIV has begun his official duties as the new head of the Catholic Church, and he's already made history as the first American to hold the papacy. He addressed Catholic cardinals saying, "You have called me to carry the cross and to be blessed." CBN's Brody Carter reports.
A rousing cheer from St. Peter's Square greeted the new pontiff as Catholic cardinals broke tradition and elected 69-year-old Robert Prevost, a Chicago-born missionary to Peru, as the first American pope.
Prevost was not the person we thought was going to be coming out on the balcony, so it was a big surprise.
In an interview on CBN's Faith Nation, Father Thomas Reese, a senior analyst with Religion Service, said Prevost spent 2 decades in Peru ministering in a diocese he would eventually lead, an experience that shaped his path to the papacy.
The Latin American cardinals seem to have liked him very much, so that they looked on him as one of their own, not a gringo. And I think their support was very decisive in electing him as Pope.
Prevost was brought to Rome in 2023 to lead the office that vets bishops worldwide, one of the most powerful roles in the Church. Now, as Pope Leo XIV, his priorities closely mirror Francis, blending social concern with theological tradition.
He will be totally in line with Pope Francis's concern about justice, peace, and protecting the environment. I think that's part of the DNA of the papacy today. So he's going to be very concerned about the plight of migrants, of refugees. He's going to be calling on people to pay attention to all the starving people in the world. And he's going to be very strong in speaking out for peace.
A message welcomed by many, even as it challenges others within the U.S. Church. The historic election of the first American Pope sparked reactions across the globe, including questions about what his national origin might mean for the Vatican's global role.
We're leaning towards someone with a perspective from other parts of the world, and America certainly has a lot of power in the world, and I thought they might not want that concentration of power, but from everything I've heard, they've chosen a really good man who loves God and wants to do the right thing.
To see the news, was unexpected. I thought it was going to be a European or maybe someone else, but this is great news. He's young, he's 69, so hopefully he gives us some length and has a great run.
And his first possible foreign trip could come later this month to Turkey, marking a key milestone in early Christian history, the 1700th anniversary of the First Council of Nicaea. I'm Brody Carter, CBN News.
Joining us now for more on the new Pope is Justin Murph. He's the canon for global affairs for the Anglican Church. Justin, he's the first pope from America, so how big of a surprise is this choice, and what do we know about his views?
Well, hi, Gary. It certainly was a surprising choice. If you had 10 candidates of who you were most likely considering for pope, he wasn't on that list. So this was a huge surprise. The impact, though, I think it's a great identifier for where the cardinals want to see the Vatican go. So you have a missionary pope, a pope who has spent so many years, decades of his life in missionary service down in Latin America, where he really had a great sense of ministry. But because of his time in Latin America, it also has shaped some of his views and his worldview and perspective, particularly as it relates to migration, immigration, and climate policies. These are areas that were keenly effective when he was down in Peru, and he's carried those with him to Chicago. So in an age of digital media, of course, every tweet and every message is going to be scrutinized. But I think what most Catholics are hoping for is a moderate pope who will be really focused on the tradition of maintaining the Catholic tradition of the Church. But there could be a great opportunity for openness, dialogue, and ecumenical partnership for evangelicals and Protestants as well.
The Pope is a global representative of Jesus Christ, and as a Protestant, Justin, what are your hopes for the public face that he puts on Christianity?
Well, I think he's going to obviously take a trip to Ephesus here shortly. This would be a great opportunity to speak publicly and boldly about the plight of Christian persecution in Turkey, of those who have been marginalized, especially the Christian workers, as we've seen many evangelicals ousted from Turkey. I hope he takes advantage of that opportunity to speak, as some would say, truth to power in that country. We're hoping also to see a greater opportunity for ecumenical dialogue and cooperation. I know we certainly would love to see that as Anglicans representing the largest group of Protestants in the world. But we think that there's a great opportunity with the new Pope who has this Western background, American Pope, but also from the global South, ministering many, many years in Peru. And so it's really this great blend of Western Church, global South, all together in one Pope. So it's exciting to see what the Lord is going to do in this next few years of his early pontificacy.
Yes, he's an Augustinian, and I must remark that Augustinians take a vow of poverty. They're very much involved in serving the poor. So what could he do to help all Christians work more closely together?
You know, one of the things that could be most helpful, particularly as we're coming out of remembering 1,700 years of the Church Council, would be to create an opportunity for leaders of the global church to gather together, key denominational leaders and folks from around the world. We've seen things like Lausanne take place earlier in the year. Wonderful event, but noticeably absent from some of these large gatherings have been the historic churches. So perhaps this Pope could actually inaugurate a new season of ecumenical dialogue by inviting the whole breadth of the Christian body of Christ together to meet, to fellowship, and to commune with one another.
Okay, Justin Murph, thank you for joining us. Coming up, in parts of Syria, Muslim extremists are laying down Sharia law. See how it's threatening religious minorities right after this. Welcome back to Christian World News. In Syria, tensions between local fighters and pro-government forces are increasing. Israeli drones carried out a strike near Damascus, calling it a warning operation to protect the Druze faith community. Chuck Holton has the story from Syria.
Gunmen patrolled the streets of Damascus last week following a deadly confrontation between local Druze militants and forces loyal to the new regime. At least 10 people were killed, highlighting the deep mistrust and lack of control that still plagues the Damascus suburbs more than a decade into Syria's civil war.
We are afraid because there are outlaw gangs. They are harming our nation. Of course, we are afraid because there's nothing to deter them. Security forces are coming here, but the problem is these gangs are out of control.
Officials announced a truce the next day, pledging to compensate victims and prosecute the perpetrators. Many here doubt it'll last, pointing to a long history of broken promises and failed ceasefires.
There are still attacks on Druze villages and areas. To be honest, when we fight for our community, we are fighting for Syria. We are not fighting for the Druze sect. This is our nation.
Why does this keep happening every now and then? It's as if there's no state or government in charge. They need to establish security checkpoints, especially in areas where there are tensions.
This week's unrest wasn't isolated. Just outside the capital, another clash left over a dozen dead, most of them Syrian security personnel. Israel later confirmed multiple drone strikes targeting what it called an extremist group preparing attacks on the Druze population. The operation marks the first time Israel has directly struck HTS forces inside Syria, a warning as the militant group attempts to expand its reach amid growing chaos. Here in Syria's northeast, tensions are still just as high. The building behind me still shows the scars from where ISIS executed prisoners when they controlled this area back in 2015. Kurds, Christians, Yazidis, and even the Arab communities here are united in rejecting HTS as just another iteration of the Islamic State. So for now, This part of the country remains under Kurdish control, but locals say they're prepared to resist any takeover, and that resistance could set the stage for future conflict. The overthrow of the Assad regime last December left a power vacuum here, and Syria is becoming a patchwork of competing factions. Extremist groups like HTS are instituting Sharia law in areas they control, often at the point of a gun. But with local communities resisting and outside powers like Israel stepping in, the next phase of Syria's conflict may be even more volatile.
Chuck Holden is here with us now for more on the situation in Syria. Chuck, this Islamic leader, Shara, he says he's trying to convince the world that no, he's not pursuing Sharia law, but you have discovered otherwise. Tell us what you found out.
That's right. We talked to some people who had escaped from areas that are under their control, and what they say is that they are instituting Sharia law in those areas, segregating the men from the women in the buses and in the mosques and things like that. And many of them are trying to flee into the areas that are controlled by the Kurds. So as it turns out, you can put a suit on a jihadi and he's still a jihadi. And if you look at the Telegram messages and Twitter messages that are being put out by HTS in English, they don't line up with the messages that are being put out in Arabic. They're two completely separate messages for different audiences.
Well, that's interesting because you had mentioned you can put a suit on him, but he's still a jihadi. I mean, we know that Shara is a former member of ISIS, right?
That's right.
Al-Nusra as well, Al-Qaeda.
Right.
So does a leopard change its spots?
Yeah, no, absolutely not. And so the real question is just how long he will last, because what we found while I was there is that nobody likes him. Even the Sunnis, which is 60% of the population in Syria, they don't like him. And so what drives me crazy is they keep referring to him as the new president of Syria. He's not the president. He's just a thug that took over. He will never be the president, because if he ever were to hold elections, he would lose and lose badly. But it's likely that that won't take place. He'll just hold on to power as long as he can.
He's self-appointed.
He is.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, let's talk about the Christians that are in northeastern Syria, because you spent a lot of time there. What is the threat to them? It isn't from the Sharia law as much as it is from a neighbor to the north. Tell us about that.
That's right. Well, Turkey has been very violently aggressive toward the Kurds and the Christians in that northern part, just everybody, even the Arabs in that northern part of Syria. They want to create a buffer zone up there, and they are pushing into that area further and further using their proxy forces, which is now called the Syrian National Army, was once called the Free Syrian Army. Before that, they were just called ISIS. And these are guys, the SNA are made up of ISIS fighters who escaped at the end of the caliphate in 2019 and changed their uniforms to Turkish uniforms and just joined the Turkish forces. So
same people.
They are same people, except now instead of just small arms, they're backed up by Turkish tanks and Turkish F-16 fighter jets. So that makes them far, far more dangerous. And the drone strikes are a big thing all across northern Syria now. So what you find are the Kurds are building tunnels, hundreds of miles of tunnels, all throughout the northern area in anticipation of having to fight Turkey.
Well, does President Trump get it? Because he's very close to Erdogan, and Erdogan's the one who's ordering all of this.
Yeah, it's hard to say what President Trump is thinking there, other than he just likes strong men. And in this case, Erdogan is the strong man in the region. But there's no question that Erdogan is fully Muslim Brotherhood and has nefarious designs on that part of Syria that the Kurds call Rojava, that is actually the only part of Syria that's safe for people to be in. So you have people fleeing to the area from all over Syria now, Kurds, Christians, Yazidis, everybody. And so the scary thing is what's going to happen when U.S. troops pull out of there.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. Yeah. So they're present in the eastern part.
Yeah, we've still probably got about 1,000 troops there. They've already pulled out about 1,000, so they've cut the force in half. And they are pulling out of bases that Turkey is trying to move into. We saw the United States actually bombing one of its own bases after they pulled out of it, just to destroy everything there so it couldn't be reused. But you have to be very careful, because the United States acts as distilling agent, as an agent of calm in that chaotic place. And if the U.S. pulls out, you're going to see a lot of bloodshed in that area. And unfortunately, a lot of it is going to be shed by our allies, the Kurds.
Okay, we'll see what happens. Chuck Holton, we appreciate you. We're glad you're safe. Welcome home. Good to have you back.
Glad to be here.
Up next, find out why believers have become second-class citizens in a Christian nation. And see how religious awakening could be right around the corner. Welcome back. A sign of growing interest in Christianity in the United Kingdom. More than 2,000 young people gathered to seek God in an all-night prayer and worship event recently, packing out the Hackney location of St. Church. The gathering was marked by salvations and, quote, deep repentance. Pastor Al Gordon wrote, there was a thick and heavy sense of God's presence, dozens giving their lives to Christ. Great Britain once served as a base for world evangelism and Christian missions. Today, it's known more for abandoned churches and blatant discrimination against Christians. The good news? A move of God is now underway. Dale Hurd has that story.
You'll be excused to think that this is a church, but as is the case across the UK, we've took it over. It's now actually a mosque, a masjid. Christianity is depleting, atheism is unfulfilling, Islam is here and it's here to stay for you. So carry on making those churches for us, keep them empty. We'll buy them in a few years' time and we'll make them into a mosque.
For decades in Britain, interest in church was so low, thousands of historic church buildings were abandoned, turned into bars, skate parks, and even mosques. And in this officially Christian nation where the king is prayed over and anointed with oil by an archbishop, a poll showed that most British Christians experience hostility and ridicule for their faith. An Army veteran last year was convicted for a thought crime, his private prayer, and residents living near abortion clinics have been warned about praying inside their own homes. A public stand for Christ here could easily cost you your job or your career. In officially Christian Britain today, it is Bible-believing Christians who are the outsiders. They're the ones who are expected to keep silent and not offend others. The Rushmore Borough Council west of London even proposed criminalizing public Christian prayer, singing, and evangelism in the towns of Aldershot and Farnborough, before an intervention by Christian Legal Center attorney Michael Phillips temporarily halted the move.
And so when I read over this proposal, it was literally banning almost everything, to ban amplification, to ban singing, to ban street preaching if it is hostile towards people with protected characteristics. It means the decimation of free speech. And that's, these are the kinds of threats that we're seeing across the country.
One of the evangelists facing a ban is Jamie Brody, who told us about one of his encounters with police.
To begin with, some junior officers came and they tried to shut off the microphone straight away. So I began recording them and I just tried to engage them in a discussion. And I said, look, please, can you tell me what law you're acting upon?
After a public outcry, the preaching ban was put on hold. But we asked Brody if a new law would stop him.
Much of the New Testament was written from prison. So, no.
This has been happening for decades. The removal of crosses, the removal of prayer, the continual arrest of street preachers.
Andrea Williams of Christian Concern, which is helping Brody, says that while there are large dynamic churches in the UK, anti-Christian hostility has caused many British Christians to self-censor, to keep their faith private.
There's a whole raft of self-censorship. The church has censored itself in this country. It's as if we've become ashamed of the gospel, ashamed of our history, ashamed of who Christ is, so that we've removed him from the public space.
Now, suddenly, after decades of both religious apathy and secular opposition, British newspapers are beginning to use the word revival. Churches reported record attendance on Easter, and more British young men are going to church. Justin Brierley is the author of The Surprising Rebirth of Belief in God.
I think that's been the surprise for me, is to see that intellectual shift now being met by a real wave of interest, especially interestingly from young people in this country who it appears are returning to church again. Very often these are young people who don't necessarily have any history with Christianity. So these are very unchurched Gen Z people.
And so this new generation that are rising up, they're growing up with no knowledge of Christianity. That's why the young Christians, this new wave of Christians, are generally quite radical.
Jamie Brody, too, believes revival is near.
My opinion is that I can feel it. I can feel it in my fingers. God is doing it.
Jamie also says God has taken the attempt to silence his preaching and turned it around.
I have never seen more unity in the local area between the churches, and I've never seen more interest in evangelism. God is working.
The British author G.K. Chesterton once wrote that Christianity has died many times and risen again. It appears to be rising again in Great Britain. Dale Hurd, CBN News, London.
You can get Christian World News delivered straight to your inbox. To sign up for our weekly email update, just go to cbnworldnews.com. We'll be right back. Finally this week, Season 5 of the hit series The Chosen makes its Prime Video debut on June 15th. The Chosen, The Last Supper, features 8 episodes and will be released in 3 parts over 3 weeks. The first 2 episodes air on Sunday, June 15th, that's Father's Day, and it's followed by 3 more on June 22nd and the last 3 on June 29th. Season 5 made its theatrical debut on March 28th in the U.S. and April 11th internationally, grossing about $60 million and counting. Well, that's it this week for Christian World News. Thank you for joining us. Until next week, goodbye and God bless you.